Welcome back. Goroka MP Bira Kimisopa today raised the issue of high airline travel costs in Parliament. He wanted to know why it was more expensive to fly out of Goroka, which is closer to Port Moresby, than to fly out of Mount Hagen. Mr. Kimisopa said this is not economical and passengers will be paying more with time. State Enterprise Minister William Duma admitted airline costs in the country were very high, and he has asked the Air Niugini management to find ways to reduce costs in the country. Jehab Bakia reports.
It currently costs 660 kina from Goroka to Port Moresby and 7 kina less from Mount Hagen to the nation's capital. According to the Goroka MP, in the long run passengers will pay more, which is not fair to the traveling public, especially when the distance is shorter compared to other major centers like Mount Hagen City. Mr. Kimisopa queried the rationale behind this and what the government is planning to do about it.
It's 660 for one way. Compared to Mount Hagen to Port Moresby, 653 kina 90 toya. So the difference of about 10 kina 10 toya. For obvious reasons, Mr. Speaker, the flight distance Goroka is shorter than Mount Hagen, yet people flying out of Goroka are paying a little bit more. Mr. Speaker, they're paying roughly about extra 1,600 per day, 11,000 per week. In a year, the people flying out of Goroka, Eastern Highlands, and a fair bit of Simbo subsidizing PNG, Air Niugini, almost 588,000 kina.
Minister responsible for state enterprises William Duma said this was a fact, and since taking over the ministry recently, he has had an audience with the Air Niugini management in this regard. The airline company says costs are high because of the fees they have to pay, such as fuel, airport fees, and etc.
The cost of travel, for one to travel in Air Niugini has always been very high. Historically, the costs have always been high in this country, while the cost of traveling in Papua New Guinea are very high compared to those started by airlines in the region. And the first response from the management of Air Niugini, Mr. Speaker, was that it is mainly to do with surcharges, airport charges, the cost of fuel, and charges imposed by our own IRC, for instance.
As for the different airline costings from different airports in the country, Minister Duma told Parliament that he will find out with the airline and let the MP know. He has also directed the Air Niugini management to find ways of reducing costs of air travel.
It is a bit unusual, so I would like to assure the man for Goroka and his people that I will take it upon the management and I'll ask them to explain why this is the case, especially for Goroka.
Overall, Papua New Guinea has one of the highest costings when it comes to the aviation industry, something that the current minister is attempting to address. Johe Bakir, NBC National News, Port Moresby.
More than 300 students graduated from the International Education Agency, IEA, TAFE College today. This graduation ceremony also commemorates the 40th anniversary of the IEA's operations in Papua New Guinea. Guest Speaker Kidi Haraka Keko, Superintendent Commanding Officer of the Correctional Services, applauded the agency's contribution in building Papua New Guinea's workforce. He said with changes in technology, the country needs educated elites to move things forward. Kevin Dayonga has more.
The graduation ceremony commemorates with the 40th anniversary of the International Education Agency. With the theme Learning for Life, Skills and Attitudes, the institution saw more than 300 students graduate today in different courses, ranging from business and finance, hospitality, information and technology, among others. Speaking to the graduating students, Haraka Keko, Superintendent Commanding Officer of the PNG Correctional Services, says capacity building for human resource is very important in every country. They will drive development of our country to the next level.
With the global development framework already adopted and in place, starting at home and building on the wisdom of our own ethical framework, will achieve smart, wealthy, healthy, and wise people in the face of the world that lacks moral values and ethical leadership.
He added that education in any form will transform lives and help citizens make informed choices.
Education is a fundamental human right of all citizens in Papua New Guinea. It is basic service and key to sustainable development, including peace and stability within and among our people.
The event was witnessed by parents and sponsors of the graduates. Kevin Danga, NBC National News, Port Moresby.
Turning abroad, Donald Trump has repeated comments that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton created the Islamic State group. The Democrat candidate has attacked Mr. Trump, clearing the claim is not only wrong, but his smear against the president.
Donald Trump seems oblivious to the mounting criticism against him. Every day brings a new provocation.
ISIS is honoring President Obama. He is the founder of ISIS. He's the founder of ISIS. And I would say the co-founder would be crooked Hillary Clinton.
The statement was all the more inflammatory given he'd said the same thing at an earlier rally.
They're the founders. In fact, I think we'll give Hillary Clinton, ISIS will hand her the Most Valuable Player Award. Her only competition is Barack Obama.
His supporters loved it, but there was outrage and disbelief elsewhere. Hillary Clinton tweeted, "Anyone willing to sink so low so often should never be allowed to serve as our commander-in-chief. No, Barack Obama is not the founder of ISIS." Cable giant CNN corrected him with a banner saying he's not. The Democrats' nominee has already accused Mr. Trump of crossing the line with comments earlier this week that seemed to incite violence against her.
If you are running to be president or you are president of the United States, words can have tremendous consequences.
She had the backing of Patty Davis, daughter of the Republican President Ronald Reagan, who said, "Yes, Mr. Trump, words matter, but then you know that, which makes this all even more horrifying." Other Republicans do blame the Obama-Clinton regime of creating conditions for ISIS to flourish by pulling American forces out of Iraq. At least one Republican is prepared to publicly defend Donald Trump.
Hillary Clinton's inability to negotiate or being able to keep troops in Iraq is clearly what caused ISIS.
But with support like this, there's no sign Donald Trump is about to back off.
The UN has criticised Russia's plan over a delay in 3-hour ceasefire to allow aid into Aleppo, saying it's not enough time. UN Special Envoy Staffan Mistura says he needs at least 48 hours ceasefire. He warned that time is running out for up to 2 million civilians who are trapped into the war-torn city.
At a news conference in Geneva, the UN's top envoys to Syria downplayed a Russian military's proposal for a daily 3-hour pause in violence in Aleppo city.
First of all, we, the UN, were not consulted. Second, based on what we heard from Jacob El-Hilo, our humanitarian coordinator in Damascus, 3 hours are not enough.
The UN says the Russian military announced the proposal on its own without consulting the UN and stresses the plan doesn't guarantee a pause by all fighting forces. The UN says a 48-hour weekly ceasefire throughout Syria is the minimum that's required, saying it needs time to deliver aid to all battleground districts.
The stakes could not be higher in the coming days, because really millions of Syrian civilians are now in a seeming free fall.
In rebel-held eastern Aleppo city, opposition forces dismissed the Russian proposal as a publicity stunt.
Russia offers a ceasefire now. Why? It's because we've turned the table on them. It's because we opened a new road with help from God.
That new road in southwestern Aleppo was open last Sunday when rebel fighters broke the weeks-long government siege. Initially, there was optimism that would open a path for humanitarian supplies for nearly 300,000 civilians in rebel-held eastern Aleppo. But over the past several days, very little aid has gone through. Aid groups say the path is narrow, surrounded by fighting, and still too dangerous to travel. Despite the UN's apparent disappointment with the Russian proposal, the UN says they plan to meet a Russian delegation to discuss the idea and maybe even work out what the UN says can be a more effective plan. Throughout this conflict, there have been many calls for a pause in violence. Rarely have they worked or lasted. Many civilians are anxious to see if this plan will be any different.
NBC National News continues after the break. Stay with us.